A moment in history and a reminder of past tensions. 25 years after the Berlin Wall was torn down, a warning of a new Cold War. Do barriers ever fall completely between old foes, and have lessons been learned elsewhere in the world? This is Inside Story. Well, joining us for the discussion today are three guests. Here with me in the studio is Karen Lucas, a journalist who grew up in East Germany and witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall. And joining us from Berlin, we have Erwin Collier, director of the John F. Kennedy Institute for North American Studies and a specialist on German reunification, and Steve Sabella, an award-winning Palestinian-born artist. Welcome to you all. But Karen, can I... Profound change was coming, wasn't it? Can I just at this juncture talk to you, Steve, in Berlin? As a relative newcomer, you've been in Berlin for 4 years. Are you picking up on this kind of weight of history that must be experienced at this moment, 25 years on? Are you feeling this from fellow Berliners as you wander around the city today?
Well, I have to say, I come from Jerusalem, which from a place that has seen another wall going up, and I live in Berlin, and to see the contrast between Jerusalem and Berlin is quite something these days. I mean, I live in a city which feels very peaceful and very unified today, even though you meet sometimes people who think of the past and they have nostalgia for the past for their own reasons. But on the other hand, the city today thrives, and if something is proven, that all walls, all these measures are cosmetic. They are dealing with side effects and they do not work. And the same thing, the wall fell down here, it's inevitable, it's going to fall down in Palestine, where Israel built the wall.
We'll come back to that a little bit later on in the programme, Steve, but thank you very much for that. And Erwin, can I just get your initial on that? But in the meantime, we're going to move on to some other barriers that still exist, because the Berlin Wall has indeed fallen, and others still exist all over the world. Are there any lessons, therefore, to be learned from Germany? Israel has built a separation wall in the occupied West Bank. It says it's to protect civilians from Palestinian attacks. When it's finished, it's expected to be over 700 kilometres long. And just last month, Egypt started to work on a buffer zone in the Sinai Peninsula along its border with the Gaza Strip. It began building a barrier along that border in 2009. North and South Korea are separated by what's described as the most heavily militarised border in the world. The 250-kilometre barrier was created in 1953 at the end of the Korean War. The United States border with Mexico is reported to be one of the most frequently crossed international boundaries in the world. To date, almost 900 kilometres of walls and fences have been built to deter undocumented migrants. And Northern Ireland's so-called troubles may have been resolved by the Good Friday Agreement of 1998, but so-called peace lines still separate Catholics and Protestants in Belfast. Now we go back to Steve. And Steve, I just wanted to ask you a little bit, as somebody who comes from Jerusalem and is an artist, and this image of the wall that separates or is hoping to separate or keep out Palestinians, is what the Israelis say. That's featured very heavily in your work. And I'm just wondering if you could explain to us, as we look at some of the images from your collection of work, as to how big an impression living within close proximity to a wall, a physical structure, what sort of impression did that have on you?
Well, in Jerusalem, I've seen the wall built from scratch, and can you imagine, I mean, Jerusalem historically, how important it is as a city, and then you have the ugliest structure on earth, in my opinion at least, going up in front of your eyes. And for me, that was a major failure by Israel, because if they believe in security, the last thing you do is build a wall like this. And may I remind people, this wall is 8 to 9 meters high, and it's already probably more than 700 kilometers. And the failure being that Israel refuses to deal with the core issue, and the core issue, and I'm loud and clear about it, is the occupation of Palestine.
I think now, Steve, we can actually see a piece of your work called Settlements, 6 Israelis and 1 Palestinian, which is a very stark illustration of your work, showing 6 Israelis in underwear and a Palestinian in underwear. What were you trying to say through that work? And it must have been a bit difficult to get people to persuade people to take their clothes off.
Yeah, well, probably context in this work becomes content. I mean, ask yourself, how can a Palestinian, being me in this case, convince 6 Israelis to strip to their underwear and have them stand in almost the Holocaust range, and directly facing them is the Palestinian also in underwear. And what I wanted to say with this work, the last thing I wanted to say is the human aspect. Actually, I wanted to create a work that is visually charged and that to create a visual confrontation. When you enter that space, when you stand in the middle of the room, you have to side either with the Palestinian and give your back to the Israelis, or look at the Israelis and give your back to the Palestinian. Now, one of the mistakes, in my opinion, for this struggle is the idea of being balanced. You can't be balanced about the Palestinian-Israeli struggle. Why? Because if the Israelis are wrong, the world has to say the Israelis are wrong. If the Palestinians are wrong, then the world has to say the Palestinians are wrong.
Absolutely. Steve, can I just interrupt you there and just ask you a little bit more about the kind of the psychology of having a wall present, the psychological effect. There's been some interesting research done which suggests that people living within close proximity to such a structure actually suffer certain psychological conditions. I mean, can you talk about that at all? Have you come across that at all, and how is that expressed in your work?
Well, I have been speaking about this for many, many years. I actually said more than once what Israel and Palestine needs is actually a team of psychologists, probably 5 to 10,000, that should go on TV, on radio, on every magazine and just heal the nation psychologically. We are definitely entered a very bad times now. And actually, the president of Israel just recently said the Israeli society might be sick. I mean, I can't quote the right quote, and he said it needs healing. I totally agree. And I will add to this one more thing. That we're not only that people are suffering psychologically, I think we have entered a new era, which is, in my opinion, the colonization of the imagination, where people are no longer able to imagine, let's say in the case of Palestinians, that they can be free, and Israelis need to get rid of this occupation because it's also sickening for them. So what I'm actually thinking today, that every Palestinian should wake up and just say, I am a free person. Because if we can't imagine we are free people, how, in the name of God, are we going to free the land?
OK, Steve, can I... Here in Doha, Owen Collier in Berlin and Steve Sabella also in Berlin. Thank you all very much indeed. A really interesting conversation. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us here on Inside Story. And remember, you can add your voice to this discussion. You can leave us your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. On Twitter, our handle is @AJ Inside Story. And as we reflect on the moment the Berlin Wall came down, we'll leave you now with some images of some of the many barriers that still exist. I'm Martine Dennis. Thank you for watching.